Okay, so now we're talking about the discussion section. And in the discussion section, we are doing a lot of analysis. That's our big portion here is our analysis section. In the discussion, you're going to provide a brief overview of the lab experience. What did you set out to do? What did you do? And kind of just a reflection of what happened. Again, it's brief, but you're really setting up your analysis of your data. So you again want to maybe revisit what the hypotheses were. But again, in the overview, you're saying what basically happened in this lab. What did you see? You're going to look at the major themes. So in here, there's a lot of explanation of trends. Again, in the discussion, you're going to refer back to the results section a lot. As seen in table 2, as seen in figure 3, the reaction rate goes up as time goes down, whatever that may be. You're going to refer a lot to the results. This section, you are explaining your data, you are explaining the trends, you're going in and trying to extrapolate any meaning out of this, whereas in the results, you're simply just presenting your data. So the discussion of the major themes, it tends to be a bit lengthier because you're really going back to those results and saying, what does every graph, what does every table mean? Then we want to talk about any sources of error. Now you've done this before in several other instances, but in here, we want to look at what error could have occurred in the lab that could have skewed our data or could have affected our data. Think of human error is okay to mention, but it's not technically a source of error. So just because you didn't time it properly, that would not be a valid source of error in the experiment. However, perhaps you could say when the catalase was made, there was a different, maybe the fluctuation of the mass of the potato was different, therefore some solutions of catalase were fairly more concentrated, some weren't. Because when I weighed the potatoes, it was supposed to be 50 grams, but it didn't come out as 50.0 every time. So you can't say that. Now it was all dumped into the same flask, so it shouldn't have made a difference. In a lot of your data, it didn't, but you could account for that as a source of error. Think through this. Think through everything from the little paper discs you use, to the equipment you used, to the water bath for the temperature. Really go through everything and just sort of dissect everything in this lab to find out what sources of error could have happened. Could it have been with the equipment? Could it have been with whatever? But you want to explain how did that affect the data. And then I want suggestions for future experiments. This is not a section where you say, I hated this lab and I don't want to do it anymore. It's simply saying, what were the merits? What was good about this? What did you like? Was it easy? Did it show you what it needed to show you? What are the merits of it? And then what could you improve upon? What are the improvements you could make? Maybe you would say we would do more trials. Maybe you wouldn't use filter paper discs. There's several versions of this lab out there. So you could say, what improvements would you make? And so you'll reflect back on there and say what would help, or even how would you extend your studies? Maybe you had data that worked, but you want to extend it to say you want to do more trials or over a longer period of time, or maybe different concentration, I don't know, whatever you want to do, but that's what I'm going to ask you to go through. Is really reflect and figure out what could be done in the future to make this even better. The conclusion, it tends to be a bit short. So in the discussion, this is a fairly longer section. This one is sort of your wrap up. Okay, it doesn't have to be a long time or a lot of writing to do this. You're going to reflect on the data. Again, simply say this is what we set out to do. This is what we did. This is what we're coming away with, what knowledge, what understanding. You do need to revisit the hypotheses. So in this conclusion, you're going to revisit all 5 hypotheses. You're going to say, initially we thought that the higher temperatures would increase reaction rate based on our data, based out of figure 1, figure 3, table 2, based out of everything that we've accumulated, we realize that that is not the case, that maybe cooler temperatures increase reaction rate. You would want to do that for each of the 5 hypotheses. And then just any general wrap up and concluding remarks, anything that wasn't addressed in the discussion, anything that you think you could really wrap this up and bring it to a close. And so that's your conclusion. And again, that's usually maybe a paragraph or 2. It doesn't, and it could be as long as you want it to be, but the discussion is far more lengthier. And then the last thing is your works cited. Again, this first part was what I showed you in the beginning of the video, and how your sources are cited within the paper. Again, that's author's last name, and then the year of the publication. If there is no author, you can give the title of the work, and then again the year. If you find the author's last name but there's no year, you could do something like last name, but then if there's no year, you would put N period D period. It stands for no date. So however this works, if you get a website, sometimes websites it's hard to find a date, you would just put ND like that. That's within the paper, and then you should have a works cited. It should be formatted to the APA format. So you'll go through and again, do the formal version. There are citation generators out there that might help you. If you Google citation generator, that's one that's really good. Another one is EasyBib, sorry. EasyBib is another good one where you can go through, put all the information, and it'll generate your works cited. But that is your formal lab report. You're going to get a chance to really reflect and look at all your data, see what themes you came up with and what it all meant. And this is designed to help you to reflect back on that lab so that you understand truly the important parts of a science experiment, but also how to communicate your findings. So I hope that helped. If there's any questions, of course, feel free to ask me. But keep working on this, keep trying, and I'm here for anything you need. All right.